All right. Good morning, and my name is L.A. Gillum, and I'm here to talk about smart network data services. So what I'm going to talk about is first a little bit about Postmaster, which I'll get into in a second, and then dive into SNDS and what's the problem we're trying to address with this system, the goal about how we want to achieve it, what it does today, what it's going to be doing soon, why I hope you'll use it, some feedback I want to get on it, and hopefully we'll have time for some questions. So Postmaster is kind of the starting point for any questions you have related to sending mail into Hotmail or Windows Live. It's got information on the different programs we have, stuff like sender ID. You can find out information there about how to adopt, why to adopt, that sort of stuff. We've got a program that, for any of you that are familiar with AOL's SCOMP feed, it's called a junk mail reporting program, and it gives you the message bodies of the mails that our users hit the "This is junk" button for mail that you send. That can be pretty useful for understanding any bad stuff in your ISP mail server, for instance. It's got information and a pointer to the SNDS site, which I'll get into in a second. And it's got some support information, some information that hopefully helps you deal with problems yourself. And if you can't, it tells you how to contact us so that we can help you. So, Smart Network Data Services. Besides being a mouthful, it's obviously a website. And I, in fact, encourage you to go to the website and check it out while I'm talking. I bet many of you could be viewing some really interesting data about your networks by the time I'm done speaking. So the problem is basically stuff we're all already familiar with. And the fact is it makes customers unhappy today. When I berate people for not having broadband, it's not irregular for me to hear, well, why should I pay more for the bad stuff to reach my computer that much faster? It's clearly a tangible problem for the industry. So what do? We try and stop it, and the way we try and do that right now is sort of last minute before it hits the user, we try and jump in there and grab it. And the fact is, that works. It makes a dent in the problem, and we learn some stuff. But the fact is, it's not really solving the problem. So another solution is to try and take what we're learning and go and apply it in a place that it has more value per work input. And so the idea is that this has the potential to actually start solving the problem instead of just mitigating it. Now, there's people doing this today, but the fact is there's not very many. And so that's sort of what I'm here to address, is try and get people shifted from mode number 1 into mode number 2. One of the ways I'd like to appeal to the idea of doing this is that the stop it at the last minute approach means it's coming from everywhere, and you've got to figure it out and stop it all those places. The total number of problems in the system, if you will, is order n squared. Whereas if you decide to keep yourself clean, then theoretically what you have to work on is keeping yourself clean, and you only have one problem, and the total system is actually much more efficient at solving the problems. You've actually reduced the work in the system. For any flowchart nerds out there, you might notice that the shape on the left is the bars on either side is the predefined process, meaning that that's what'll happen if we don't do the thing on the right, which is the decision symbol, to actually be proactive and address the problem directly. But so we're not where we are today by accident. The fact is that today people and ISPs are measured and receive business results by how much bad stuff they receive and their customers are impacted with, not according to what they send out themselves. If you bear with me, I think there's an analogy to the healthcare industry where customers buy service from an insurance agency and don't have much perspective, and there's no business motivation according to how that insurance agency works with the doctors and the rest of the medical ecosystem. And I think there's a similar disconnect between users buying service from an ISP and how that ISP behaves in the ecosystem. Most of the rest of the stuff on the slide is hopefully stuff that people are familiar with, just repeating it for the sake of driving the points home, I guess. But I think it's worth asking the question of what do we have to do to persuade folks to deal with this problem directly. It's not as a rhetorical question, but what literally can we do? So when I was producing these slides, it sort of occurred to me that I felt like I was putting together a 12-step program. So I went to the 12-step website and sort of made my own little 7-step program. As everyone knows, the first step is to admit you have a problem. And so hopefully what I'm going to tell you about today is going to help you do that. And the next step is to believe that someone can help, and I'm here to do that. Although when attending the security buff yesterday, I found some interesting stuff, results of a survey where it was something like 2/3 of the NSPSec community felt that they were in a position to solve this problem. I thought that was particularly inspiring to some degree, although it's also so, why isn't 2/3 of the community solving the problem? So the next step in the program is to decide to do something, and hopefully that's something you'll all do today. The next 2 steps are basically use the tool to go find out where the problems are and go fix them. Step 10 is rinse and repeat, if you will. And the last one is because I have no marketing budget, tell other people about it. Tell people that this thing exists, what this crazy idea is, you know, how it works for you, all that sort of stuff, so that people can find out about it and use it. So, what is this SNDS thing anyway? It's a website that offers free and instant access to some really interesting data that we have of what we see coming from your IP space. And this data is designed to inform about problems related to this bad stuff we see on the internet. The system its purpose is to give data to ISPs so that they can make their own decisions about what activity is acceptable and not, and deal with it as they see fit. The idea being that a lot of people will make good decisions to stop bad behavior. One of the interesting aspects of this system is the automated mechanism we have to grant access to the data. You come to the site and request access for an IP, and we can tell you who you need to be and get that solved for you right instantly and automatically. And that this authorization mechanism actually authorizes people. We don't care what company you're from or what subnets you want to aggregate together under one account. This isn't something the company buys into. It's something that the guy who works at the abuse desk or an IP allocation, any email addresses that show up in your WHOIS records, for instance, they can just do this on their lunch hour. Just go to the website, sign up, look at some data, and hopefully learn some stuff. But so lastly, it's my attempt at a force multiplier. Basically what this system is data we already have, data we produce as part of our anti-spam operations, and we're trying to leverage this data to do more good than it does currently. So the goals, hopefully they're pretty clear. Hopefully this is answering the problem statement from before, is to provide information, allow ISPs to detect and deal with any undesired activity. We want to provide a broad set of data that is useful for that purpose, based off of what we see, which is hopefully a pretty good sample of what happens to the internet in general. One of the core tenets of the system is being free, that no ISP should be without this tool, without this kind of visibility. You shouldn't have to buy crazy infrastructure in your network to sniff packets and extrapolate what's happening. The fact is, I have the data, let's make use of it, and it's very useful data in that respect. So the other thing we want to focus on is bringing sort of what I call the total cost of remediation down to its absolute minimum. We all know this is about business cases, and so the idea being if I can reduce the cost as much as possible, then the bar for the benefit for convincing people that it's going to do good gets lower according to how much lower the cost is. So hopefully by giving the data for free, hopefully the cost for that aspect goes to almost zero. And I'm interested in the other aspects of the solution that enable the total cost to be as low as possible. Basically, it's a standard story for Microsoft. We just want to make the internet a better place and solve world hunger and such. So who are we to be giving data? Well, Hotmail's big, and we have 240 million accounts in 220 countries and territories. We get about 4 billion emails every day. One of the things I like to say is, in the time it takes me to say this, we'll have accepted 100,000 messages. We have a pretty big infrastructure. We get a ton of data, and we have really interesting systems that detect a lot of that as spam and stop it for the user. We get reports from the user about spam and fraud. We're finding phishing sites. We're finding malware sites. We're stopping viruses. We're getting data from the rest of Microsoft. We've got tons of data at Hotmail. Just as an illustration, this is just an overview of the system, our inbound mail system, to show you all the complexity of the systems we build and where all this data comes from and why we can afford to just give you data on the side because of all the systems we're building. So this is kind of the heart of SNDS, and I realize you probably can't see very well on the monitors, but if you're following along on the slides locally, you'll be able to see there. And so I'll just try and work you through it. Basically, once you've authorized to view some data, you click the View Data in the upper left, and day by day you can see the aggregated traffic summary for your network. You can see the left column, leftmost column is the IP address that we're going to give you data about. The next one is the hours during which it was transmitting mail. The next three columns come from SMTP, when they're how many recip commands and data commands that IP sent to us. And then the message recipients is the number of actual recipients on the data segments that they transmitted to us. That can be distinct from the recip commands in some pretty interesting ways. But then, besides general traffic stats, we give some pretty good qualitative information. We have spam filters, and we tell you the aggregate result of filtering this IP's traffic, and in terms of red, yellow, green status. We also tell you the rate at which users press the "This is junk" button on that mail. We have a pretty cool trap mail system. So we have trap accounts, and we'll tell you when that IP hit our trap accounts and how often they did that. That's pretty cool for giving you high-resolution timestamps, so you can go to your DHCP logs and figure out exactly what customer this was. Another way we provide broad data is giving you sample hello and mail from commands, so you can actually get an idea of what the traffic looks like, what the mail that's being sent looks like. And lastly, we have our comments column, which is sort of our catch-all for anything else we might want to tell you. Currently, the only thing this displays is when we find an open proxy, we'll tell you that we found an open proxy and at what time we tested it positive. Another thing you see on this screen is there's an export to CSV button, which is today our poor man's solution for being able to consume this data. If you have systems that you can feed data in about customers and it takes action, the idea is that you can export the data and feed that in to start to use this data in that fashion as well. So what we think we can accomplish today is basically show you the magnitude of the problem and give you, the evidence to back it up and see exactly where it is. And hopefully what this does is provide firepower to go get additional resources on the problem. Maybe that's someone in the abuse desk to be calling calling customers 8 hours a day and trying to get them cleaned up. Or maybe it's additional monitoring infrastructure to put into the network to get a different view. We get some pretty good feedback from our users, and some of the other things they're doing is stopping spam by doing port 25 blocking, both in the classic sense of blocking it for an entire subnet, but also using this data reactively and saying, well, this customer is sending bad mail, so I'll put in a port 25 block on him that follows him around no matter where he goes in my network. Some people actually go even further, though, and they go and contact the customer, and they help them get cleaned, and hopefully they motivate them not to get compromised again. So the system today has about 2,500 users. Most of these users are what I call senders. These are people who know they're sending mail and are often interested in the deliverability statistics that we provide. There's definitely a significant minority of users, which I call ISPs, who are people who know that they're sending some mail through their mail servers, but in reality have a much larger IP space where they're using this system to find out what's happening in the rest of that IP space. We do currently have 67 million IPs that are authorized to view data for. I think that's a pretty interesting number. And from those 67 million IPs, we account for about 10 or 20% of the inbound mail volume and the complaints that we receive every day. But my favorite statistic, I think, is that statistically speaking, on a subnet on a /24 or bigger, when it starts being monitored by this system, we see the aggregate mail output from that subnet drop by over half. And no matter how you explain that, I think it's pretty compelling. So we're working on a new release of this system where we're going to do even more. Some of the things we're going to do is to allow you to sign up using your autonomous system number instead of having to enter each of your subnets manually. We're also going to have better support for upstream providers to keep an eye on their downstream customers. We're going to provide true programmatic access so that you can really hook up systems to be totally automatic to consume this data. And we're going to be providing new data. We're expanding from just mail and spam according to our original vision, and going to give data about when we find pieces of mail infected with the virus, when we find phishing websites and malware websites using the Honey Monkey project that you might have heard about in the press about a year ago. We're also going to give sample messages. That was a pretty strong bit of feedback we got from our users, that the messages contain some important forensic information, as well as they're pretty compelling evidence to have the evidence of being caught red-handed, the actual message, instead of just somebody else's log files which said something bad happened. Now the asterisk is up there on the top because an old adage in the software industry is don't count your chickens until they hatch. This hasn't shipped yet. This is just what we're planning on shipping. It's supposed to release in about a month, so please keep us in the back of your mind for when that does ship. So why are we doing this release? Well, we want to lower the cost. We want to make it easier for people to sign up, particularly the bigger ISPs, for that ASN sign-up mechanism. And we want to make it, with the programmatic access particularly, we want to make it cheaper to keep using the system to leverage this data. In addition to sort of the end-user ISP scenarios we support today, the authorization mechanism with its better support for upstream providers, it's pretty interesting to have the ability to, as a Tier 1 ISP, to monitor the Tier 2 or even further downstream. That one of the things I heard recently from a spammer is how he uses asymmetric routing, and I think that when somebody asks to use asymmetric routing, that maybe it's pretty interesting to use something like this to check on them first and keep an eye on them to see what kind of thing he's doing with the power he's been granted. And so besides, as I said, just spam, we want to branch out into directly addressing some more of these other problems by telling you about when emails have viruses in them. Then the machine that sent that mail either itself is infected with the virus or is probably an outbound mail relay that may be worth investing in an outbound in a virus scanner to make sure that the traffic coming out of that mail server doesn't have viruses. On giving data for the phishing and malware sites, we're hopeful that there'll be more takedowns and it'll happen faster because the system's totally automatic. So once you go and you want to work with customers and deal with this problem, you're going to need tools to fix their machine. And so I sort of just assembled a list off the top of my head of various tools that are out there that help you do this, from the malicious software removal tool, which can take, I think it's something like 95% of the problems that we see on consumer machines and can disinfect that particular problem, to things like Windows OneCare, which is a ongoing keep you safe, scan your machine type system. I think an interesting thing to note is all the ones in green are actually free. That there's no cost to use any of these green ones, although the fact that there are some ones to pay for, I think, is interesting in that when you pay for something, there's opportunities for generating revenue that hopefully are compelling to help make the business case for dealing with these problems. This is just another way of breaking down the various tools that Microsoft happens to provide, and whether they attack spyware or viruses, and whether they scan once, one-shot deals, or do they keep working over time? Are they free, or is it something that there's revenue involved? But so I think most people would probably agree that there's systems today that help you do this stuff, and hopefully what I'm presenting is going to make that easier. But really, we have to make a business case about why we're doing this. And so I think, I have a personal theory that if we do this together, it benefits everyone. That customers that are broken, they get fixed, and they benefit from a cheaper, safer, better internet experience. ISPs, for instance, I think it's worth admitting that the reactive stop it before it hits me problem or approach isn't going to solve the problem, and in fact I would argue it just sort of lets it fester behind our shield of it's not hitting our customers. In fact, I would argue that some might say that cleaning yourself up for the sake of making the internet a better place is kind of altruistic. But I think there's an argument for it to be saying that that's being selfish. If we want to really get rid of this problem, to stop paying these costs, then I think this is a valid way to go to really deal with this problem. And so my skin in the game is just I want to get benefit as just one of the many people on the internet who, when you shut down something bad on the internet, it won't hit me as well as not hitting the rest of the internet. So I want to zoom in on ISP motivation. The fact is, the customers, they're unhappy, they're scared of the internet. Some of them are actually broken, and I think it's reasonable that they'd be really happy if somebody called them up and said, "Hey, we've been looking out for you, and it turns out you've got a problem on your machine. We're going to help you fix it. We're going to keep you safe." That, to me, seems like an extremely compelling way of retaining existing customers and having a strong story for new customers of why they should buy services from you. And again, it's important to note that we can bandage the problem by doing port 25 blocking and stop the bleeding, but it's clear that truly fixing the customer has more benefit, and so it's about extolling that benefit and reducing the cost of that additional work. Now, getting into costs, clearly, I think everyone in this room would understand bandwidth costs and have some idea of how much bandwidth is consumed by sending all this traffic that nobody even wants around. But another interesting aspect is the support cost. There's both people at your company that take calls from customers saying the internet is slow and please fix it, as well as people on the outside who say there's someone on your network that's spamming me, please stop them. And these support calls represent real costs to the business, and if we can make them go away, that's money we can save. Another aspect of motivation, though, is the community. How do we get the community excited and empowered to motivate this sort of action? And I would like to understand better what sort of role NANOG might have in that. So I have a couple brainstorm ideas of a sort of typical positive and negative reinforcement. I have a crazy idea about a Windows logo ISP program where one of the criteria would be the cleanliness of the network, the relative safety of the users. It's clear to me that the government's interested in this to some degree. Mostly it seems to be from the FTC. They've had a number of press releases about zombies and this sort of stuff in the last couple of years. But so, as we all know, it really is come down to the business case. And I point to a presentation from 2 nanogs ago about the future of the ISP industry, where they're basically saying that dependability, integrity, and value added is going to be the core of the ISP business. And I think this is a very interesting way to go about that. So basically, I want to appeal to both cost reduction and revenue generation. And many people have pointed out that revenue generation is often much more interesting than reducing costs. And so I appeal to you to appeal to marketing people and to salespeople about the potentials here, as well as to go and attack the costs, because any money you save is is money you save versus revenue generated is always as according to costs. It's not so unreasonable, I think, that that it's worth going and doing these things, that these business cases can be made. There was a really interesting presentation a while ago about Boston University's business case where all the student computers arriving in the fall represented a significant cost and danger to the help desk, and so they went and built a system to handle this automatically. As happenstance, there was a deal yesterday with Quest that they're going to provide our Windows OneCare safety software to their users. So clearly there are business cases to be made, and I challenge people to go and find them. So getting back to SNDS, when you actually go use it, I want to know about how easily could you use it, what were you able to get done with it, and getting more interesting, what things are missing. I volunteer that there are tools to aid the customer remediation. From Alan Duran's talk, it occurred to me that we need IPv6 support at some point. Getting onto a higher level, how do organizations see these costs and benefits? What are the costs and benefits on their own, and how do they relate to each other? And I realize that these can be sensitive sensitive numbers for the organization. So I posit that maybe NANOG could aggregate numbers so that we could understand the problem as a whole and understand the situation without anyone having to reveal any sensitive information. And lastly, sort of, how do we get enough people using it so that other people find out about it, so that some networks are clean enough that it puts pressure on other networks to clean themselves up? How do we get to that critical mass? And so one way you can get feedback to me is this msn@snds.microsoft.com, which is it's also on the website, and that goes directly to the team that built the site, including me, and we'd be very interested to read your feedback. And then once people really get their head around this thing, I'd like to understand sort of how it moves forward. There's systems today that provide some data. Return Path has their sender base. There's systems like SCOMP or our junk mail reporting program. And then there's actually sort of a new generation of tools that are doing similar things. Adam and Rick at Support Intelligence, which you guys have heard previously, have a really interesting system they call React. And barely 24 hours ago, I found out that Yahoo is interested in building a system like this, and that they're actually looking for beta partners. And if you see Irene Lai walking around here, you should grab her and tell her that you're interested. So the question of should other ISPs provide this data already almost seemed like a foregone conclusion at this point. But then once you go there, how does that happen? How do we schematize this stuff? How do we get authorization models and authentication systems so that it's not a one-off everywhere you go? And what approaches could we use to solve that? And then once we're starting to have this discussion, we have to figure out how we're going to have this discussion. Is it something a BOF for NANOG? Is it a track for MOG? Or where do we go have this? And to try and make sure that there's at least a minimum forum for collaboration, I asked Dave Crocker to set up a mailing list. Fortunately, from some logistical snafus, it's not actually up just yet, but it is up. Thank you, Dave. So it is up now. So please feel free to subscribe, and maybe we can have this discussion online. So in conclusion, you've got questions, we've got answers. Come to Postmaster and find them out. With SNDS, try it out. Tell us what happened. Tell people about it. Tell your management about it. And help us figure out what comes next. Thanks very much. How much time do I have? Okay, so I have -2 minutes. We'll answer questions really fast.
Then this one will be really fast. Pot calling kettle black. I noticed on Nick Feemster's slides yesterday, slide 12, Microsoft was in the top 10 sources that he saw for spam. Have you actually pointed your own stuff at SNDS and seen what you're sending out?
Yes.
And is it generating positive results at stemming that flow?
I am personally responsible for the systems that not only prevent abuse from hitting Hotmail, but prevent Hotmail from becoming a source of abuse. And we have taken the systems and literally connected them up. And so when people complain about mail, if it happened to be originated at Hotmail, it goes to an automatic system which starts to process that complaint, we're
Excellent.
doing this.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, well, I encourage you to find me afterwards, to find Rick and Adam, to talk about their system, to find Irene, to talk about what Yahoo's building. I think this is a really interesting thing, and we'd like to know, the value of what we're doing and how people see it. Thanks so much.